Hey guys. So hopefully this isn't completely silly, but I've been thinking about this for a while now. And I want to take a few minutes to kind of tell my childbirth story from labor to delivery. I'm telling this not for like props or like I don't know, clout, whatever you want to call it. I'm not looking for praise. I don't think that as women we talk enough about what childbirth is actually like. Even though it's 2025 now, a lot of it seems to still be very veiled in secrecy for whatever reason. And I think a lot of that secrecy incites fear in women and steers women away from natural childbirth. And it doesn't have to be I'm not trying to convince anybody that they did their labor and delivery incorrectly. That's the farthest thing from what I'm trying to say. Um, but I do think that one of the major tragedies of modern medicine and just, I guess, modern culture is that women have entirely lost their tribe, their village. Um, and that makes childbirth really scary because we don't talk about it. And when we do talk about it, it's only the bad things. So this is not a horror story of childbirth. um, it seems like a lot of, especially when you're pregnant, right? Women want to tell you how horribly their pregnancy went, and this is not that. This is me, telling a very natural, positive experience that I had. And this is also for me. I don't want to forget my experience. And I got to thinking, and I'm already a month and a half away from childbirth. And I don't want to forget any more than I already have, because if you've had a baby, you tend to forget. You tend to forget, especially the pain, right? So I decided to go through a midwife relatively late in my pregnancy. I was reading everything I could possibly consume about pregnancy, about natural childbirth. I, before now, had very little experience with children, especially small children. I mean, I'm a teacher, so teenagers I can handle, but as far as little bitty babies, like I had very little experience. I knew little to nothing about labor and delivery. Yeah, so I had a lot of work to do in the 9 months that I was pregnant, or a little less than 9 months that I was pregnant. So I started digging, and I had an OB at Mercy. She's wonderful. She didn't do anything wrong, but I went to Mercy up until about 24 weeks. And that's when I finally was like, Amanda, you're doing this naturally. Everything I'd read had pointed to it being what was best for me, what was best for my baby. Women have been having babies naturally for millennia. And so there was, I had run out of excuses to not do it. I had my pregnancy was very easy. Baby was healthy. I wouldn't say easy. My pregnancy was non-complicated. So I had no reason to not at least try to do this. So I came to my midwife at 24 weeks, which again is late compared to most women when you start that journey. But they took me in stride and were very, very good to me. The experience is entirely different than the hospital in terms of your appointments are very they just kind of sit down with you and are like, it's like having a conversation with a friend. They just ask you what your concerns are, what you're worried about. They still do all of the necessary tests. It's not like you're just, gonna go squat in the woods and have your baby. I feel like that's kind of the vibe that some people get. When you say you're having a baby naturally through a midwife, they're like, oh, you're just gonna go. Yeah. So I decided I didn't want to have a home birth. I did want to have a home birth, but I chose not to have a home birth for my first baby, just so because it was my first baby and I didn't know how my body would respond, how my body would handle labor. I still wanted to be close to a hospital, right? There is a place for modern medicine always. And so if something did go south, I wanted to be within driving distance of the hospital. But I so I decided to give birth in the birthing center instead. The birthing center is beautiful. It is set up it is a home. It's a regular house in town in Springfield. You walk in, there's a foyer with couches and chairs and a fireplace, and it's very cozy. You walk through the foyer, there's a full kitchen. So if you do have a lengthy labor, whoever's with you can make food, you can have food, whatever. And then you walk through the kitchen, you go into one of the birthing areas. There's two. There's one upstairs and one downstairs. I was in the one downstairs. There's a king size bed. Looks completely normal. There's a couch in there. There's chairs in there. There's a bathroom with a beautiful tile shower, which I ended up utilizing a lot during labor. It's just set up like a home. It's very cozy. None of the hospital ick. So anyways, my water broke at 11:30 at home on a Friday, and I had worked all day, and I knew, I told Brian, I said, there's no way I'm going all the way to 40 weeks. Like, there's no way. I was extremely uncomfortable. My belly was super tight. I'd been having Braxton Hicks contractions. So I don't know. You just know. I knew that I wasn't too far out. So that night we sat down for dinner, and I told Brian, I was like, I can't eat. I'm just so full, full of baby. I was like, I didn't have much of an appetite. I ate a little bit, and I was like, I'm just going to go to bed early. So I turned in at probably 8 o'clock, and then woke up at 11:30, and had to go pee, as per usual, right? 9 times a night at that point. I went pee, I came back to bed, and I was leaking, which, there's a lot happening at that point in your pregnancy, so you're not entirely sure. It wasn't I didn't have the balloon burst, rush of water experience. It was just like a slow dripping, not even dripping, it was leaking. So I kind of chose to ignore it. I don't know. I laid back down, but it wasn't stopping. And so I woke Brian up, and I was like, hey, can you go get me a towel? I don't know, I'm leaking. And he was like, okay. So he goes and gets me a towel. I put it underneath me, and I laid back down for a little bit longer. And I'm like, no, this isn't right. So I got up and turned the light on. And at this point had been no lights on, really. And the towel was soaked. And I was like, oh, okay. So I sent a picture to my stepmom, Tawny, and I was like, hey, I think my water broke, but I don't really know. And this is the problem, right? Because it's your first rodeo, you don't know. And then I sent a picture to my midwife, and I was like, hey, I think my water broke, but I'm not sure. And the beautiful thing about a midwife, they have somebody on call all of the time. And so just like the hospital. And so they called me, and I was like, hey, I'm pretty sure I'm having contractions. But in everything I'd read, I knew that a first labor, your first time having a baby, labor typically, not always, but typically is longer, right? Like somewhere between 12, 14, 16 hours even. And so I was talking to my midwife, and I was like, hey, I don't know. I want to try, should I just try to labor at home for a little bit? And of course she was like, it's completely up to you. It depends on, you need to time your contractions, figure out what's going on. So I was like, okay, I'll text you and let you know what we decide. So she knew whether or not to come into the birthing center. So Brian got back in bed. He figured we were starting a long journey, right? But I could tell my contractions were already very strong, and I asked Brian to time them, and we were already less than 4 minutes apart. So I was like, okay, we need to go because we have an hour drive. So we drove to Springfield. I remember very little of that. I know that I was nauseous. The pain was making me really nauseous. So I took a bowl. I'll tell you what I didn't take was shoes. I don't know. I had fuzzy socks on, and I just went barefoot. So we were unprepared. I was 3 weeks early, which was fine. We should have had the car seat in the car, but we didn't even have the car seat in. Brian literally just threw it in the back seat and quickly threw a bag together. Um, so like I said, I don't remember a lot of the drive to Springfield. I know that I was hurting. My contractions were very consistent. When we got to the birthing center, I got out. Brian knocked on the door. They came and let us in the front door. Like I said, it's just a house. Let us in the front door and got me downstairs into the birthing area or the birthing room. And I was in quite a bit of pain at this point. They wanted to check me, and they are super non-invasive in that department. So they asked for my consent first. They made sure I was okay. I was like, yeah, go ahead, check. And I was at a 3 or 4, right in that ballpark. And so it was just time to labor. I will tell you, I was not a quiet laborer. You can ask Brian. I had all these, again, you have expectations in your brain. I'd read a lot. I'd read a lot of birth stories. Ina May Gaskin is a famous, well, yeah, I'm famous. She's a famous midwife, and she's published several books, one of which the whole first half is just women's birth stories, just labor or just deliveries that she has had or done in her time as a midwife, and her patients, I hate to call them that, her patients tell their stories and publish them in this book. And that's kind of what I was going off of. There's not a lot to prepare you for the pain. There's not really a way to explain the pain. Contractions are just a wave, and that's what everybody describes them as, and you just kind of have to ride the wave. I will say I was not a very good surfer. I knew from what I'd read that it was important to keep your jaw relaxed, your mouth open, and to make really, really low tones in the back of your throat. And of course, to breathe regularly as possible. So I got into the shower. I tried to kind of just sit, but it's hard. You need to move or do something. So I went ahead and got in the shower. They turned on the hot water. The shower is very large, and so Brian was also in the shower with me. So I chose to be completely nude throughout my entire delivery. It wasn't a conscious choice. It's just one, the shower, right? But also like the clothes just get in the way, and you're not thinking about, these women that were with me. I had a midwife and 2 midwife assistants. And those women I had been talking to for weeks. Like, I knew them well. I wasn't concerned about them seeing me naked. Like, you don't have time to worry about stuff like that. So anyways, I get in the shower. And at first they asked if I wanted to sit on the ball. They could put the ball in the shower and have me sit on that and move around, but I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't even really, I decided to just go with my instinct, right? Which is the beauty of going through a midwife, is that you have that luxury, right? You're not confined to a bed. You're not hooked up to IVs, none of that. So you have the luxury of doing whatever just feels right. So I ended up getting in the shower. I got on all fours. They had little pads that they put underneath my knees. And the water from the shower, I had like my butt towards the shower head, and the water was just kind of coming down on the lower half of me, like on my lower back especially, which felt really nice. And I just screamed my head off through contractions. My sweet husband was sitting there, and he kept reminding me, low tones, make low tones. You kind of go, and it sounds silly, but a lot of coaching encourages that. So Brian would remind me. I would say things like, oh God, here comes another one. And Brian would remind me, hey, low tones, low tones. And I would start there, but by the peak of my contraction, I was screaming. So there's no shame in, not being like this silent warrior laborer. I was definitely not a quiet laborer at all. Screamed my head off, and probably traumatized my husband a little bit. But What was scary for me, and this isn't a big scary, but I was at a 3 or 4 when I got there, and I moved from a 4 to a 10 in about an hour. So that's really quick. It was a lot to wrap my brain around. And so when I was in the shower, my contractions were extremely close together. In fact, I was screaming, "Why are they so close together?" And it was because I was going through this really, really quick progression, right? I didn't know that though. So in my mind, I was at a 4 and experiencing this 10 level pain. And so I told Brian, and every woman gets to this point, okay? Every woman gets to the point where you think, I've messed up. Like, I've messed up. I can't do this. Like, I can't do this. So I hit that point and I looked at Brian and I was like, I've made a mistake. Like, I can't, if this is a 4, I am royally screwed, like royally screwed. And Brian could tell, I guess I didn't know this until later, but the midwife had come into the bathroom and kind of had like, took a look at my hind end and was like, and kind of looked at Brian and walked out of the room. So I was not at a 4 anymore. And so Brian was like, not wanting to speak out of pocket, but he was like, honey, I don't think that we have much longer. Like, I think that you're not at a 4 anymore, which was a huge relief because for a while there, I was thinking, there is no way I'm going to make it through this. There's no way I'm going to make it through this if this is a 4. But I was in fact ready to push. So that was that. So the midwife came back in. She's like, hey, hon, we've got to get out of the shower. We've got you set up in here. We're going to start pushing. So I went and I laid down. I started actually bearing down in the shower. So bearing down is like the impulse that I couldn't control it, where your tailbone kind of tucks, right? And you're starting to involuntarily push. Your body just knows what to do and you don't have a ton of control over it. So I went and I laid down in the bed. I threw up. I think that may have been before I went to the shower. I think that was before I went to the shower. See, this is why I wanted to do this sooner so I didn't forget. But I did do a lot of throwing up. It was just hormones, lots of hormones. My sweet husband was catching it for me and like not in his hands, in a container. And the midwives were great. Like a midwife caught the first round of puke, went and dumped it. She came back and Brian caught the next round of puke, went and dumped it. Very, very doted on. They were just like a well-oiled machine. My husband included, all of his instincts kicked in. So anyways, I personally do not know or understand how women give birth on their back. There was absolutely no way. The pain was excruciating. It was way worse when I was laying down. So I sat on a birthing stool, which is kind of like, stool, right? You think of like a toilet. It's almost like a toilet seat, but it's like a U shape and you're sitting at the bottom of the U and you can put your legs up and there's a hole, right? There's a hole through the center. So the midwives have room to work under there as well. Brian was sitting behind me on the bed. He was holding both of my hands, and giving me lots of important reminders, as I started to push. Pushing was so much better than contractions. It's a different kind of hurt. It's more pressure, just tons and tons and tons of pressure. But it kind of, I guess, canceled out the contraction. So when I was pushing, I was feeling the pain of pushing, but I wasn't feeling the contraction anymore. Also, the urge to push was overwhelming. Like, I didn't have any choice but to push. My body was like, this is what we're doing right now. Brian was behind me. He kept reminding me to keep my chin down. When you're in that much pain and there's that much intensity, your first instinct is to just like throw your head back and roar at the sky, right? So Brian was reminding me, hey, keep your chin down, keep your chin down. The midwives were, again, very, very helpful in that they would put their fingers where I needed to push. So they were like, push to my fingers so that I could feel where I needed to direct my energy. So I pushed for a really long time. Odin was sunny side up, so he was head down, but he was looking at the sky, which your pelvis is a very much a lock and key mechanism, right? So him being face down, he would have been lock and key like he was supposed to be, and I would have had him much sooner. But he wasn't, so I had to push him out inch by inch. Quote from my midwife, literally pushing this little guy out little by little. They continually, almost after every push, was checking his heart rate to make sure that his heart rate was staying steady, and it did. He didn't never waver on me or falter, which was good. There came a point where I realized I was starting to feel like he wasn't moving, like I wasn't progressing. And this is the point if you're in a hospital where they start talking about C-sections, right? Like they're like, oh, we're going to have a C-section. Midwives don't think that way. Every labor is different. And Odin was not in any danger, neither was I. So there was no reason to not keep going unless I just stopped pushing, right? Which wasn't going to happen. I was like determined to get this baby out. I will say that being in good shape before labor and delivery was the only thing that saved me. I pushed for over 3 hours, and there's no way that I could have done that had I not been in good shape beforehand. So there's that. So we're pushing. I know that my midwives kept saying like, oh, that was a really good push. And all I wanted to know was whether or not he was moving. Like at that point, you're like, I don't care. I don't want compliments. I need you to tell me what's happening down there. So the midwife took my hand and she said, just feel. And so I reached down and I could feel his head. He was not crowning, but I reached in and could feel his head. And that was really, really encouraging for me because I'm like, okay, even though I couldn't see it, I could visualize where he was at in my body. And that kind of remotivated me, right? It got me going again. There was a point, and I don't know the anatomy, I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but there was a point, I guess, where he passed maybe into the birth canal. I don't know, but there was a point, a set of probably about 3 pushes where I was pretty sure my hips were going to break. I felt him, there was so much pressure pushing out on my hips. I'm a very narrow person. I'm not very curvaceous, and so that part was painful, but it only lasted through like a round or 2 of pushes. And then he, whatever position he got into, the hip pain kind of became secondary. It wasn't at the forefront anymore. So like I said, I pushed forever. I got to the point where I was actually falling asleep in between pushes. It was so exhausting. But when I finally did reach the point of crowning, it was a huge relief. I will tell you, my midwives, a lot of women are really, really worried about tearing. I was one of those women. I did not want to tear. At the hospital, I probably definitely would have had an episiotomy, which is where they, for those that don't know, it's where they intentionally like manually cut you to make the opening wider and help baby come out faster. Given that Odin was sunny side up, this is probably something that would have happened at the hospital. My midwives do not do that unless the woman requests it. But they knew ahead of time. I'm like, I don't want that. They were using olive oil. They were massaging my perineum. They were doing all that they could to make sure that I did not tear. They were very diligent. And again, I had 3 women encouraging me, that were very knowledgeable, very calm. I was comfortable because I was in a bedroom. So there were some really positive things happening during all of this. I had my husband, he was with me. It was just me and Brian in the room. I personally really recommend that. It is an experience I feel like for you and your husband, and it's not stressful, right? You don't want a bunch of people in there just like staring at your hoo-ha. Like nobody wants that. So I'm glad that I made that decision. I love my mom. I love my grandma. I love my sisters. I love all of my people. They didn't need to see me in that condition. It was very much something that I'm glad Brian got to see. But yeah, it was very special for me and Brian. And I don't regret not having other people in the room. Also, so we're crowning at this point. This was weird because the midwife told me that I needed to hold. So we were finally crowning. I was exhausted from pushing for so long. And the midwife looked at me and said, you need to hold, stop. And I was like, what do you mean stop? Like, I've been pushing forever. I get this baby out. And she looked at me and she said, if you shoot this baby out, you will tear. Like, you have to slow it down or you will tear. Meanwhile, like I said, they're doing everything down there without being too graphic. They're doing everything down there that they possibly can to make sure that I don't. So I held it. She said, okay, push again. I pushed again. Out came his shoulders. She told me to hold again, which I did for a second. And then I looked at her and I said, I can't hold it. The overwhelming urge to push is just wild. Which I don't know, but I'm assuming women who get the epidural probably don't feel that so much. It's probably harder to know when to push, where to push. Anyways, so he came out finally, and Brian, bless his heart, was passing out behind me. He did so good the whole time until right at the very end. He just, I think, was holding his breath for me because he could tell I was hurting. But anyways, the midwives delayed cord clamping, so they didn't immediately cut the cord, but they did immediately hand him to me. So he's still connected to me, which is just a crazy experience, right? Like, this baby is both in you and in your arms because of the cord. I couldn't bring him all the way up to the top of my chest. He was kind of laying like here across my belly because he had a very short cord. So I went to pull him up and the midwives were like, oh, short cord, stop. So he just kind of laid across my belly. They waited for all of that good blood, right? All of that blood to go back into him before the cord was cut. They did not take him away from me. They brought a blanket for me to wrap him in. We did not worry about cleaning him. We did not worry about any of that. Another thing that I didn't know until I had a baby, childbirth is not bloody until you give birth to the placenta. But childbirth in and of itself is not a bloody experience, or it shouldn't be. So I'm holding him. He immediately went to the breast. We immediately started breastfeeding, and he was a champ. Oh, that's a lie. The placenta. We didn't immediately breastfeed. After I pushed the placenta out, then we did. That's another thing that people don't talk about. I will tell you that I've heard a lot of horror stories from women about doctors like pushing really hard on your belly to get the placenta out, or like pulling on the cord to try to get the placenta out. That was, again, not my experience at all with the midwife. So baby was wrapped in a blanket and handed to Brian first. So that I could give birth to the placenta. This, I'm told, usually happens in at most like 3 pushes if you're left alone to do it natural. So I just stood up. I will say I was raised on a farm. I've seen a lot of cows give birth. I kind of felt like an old cow in this moment, but it's fine. They had me stand up. They had a metal bowl. I gave one push, the placenta came out, and I caught it in that bowl. That is a wild feeling. It's very much, sorry for the graphics, but it's very much like a slurp. And you're giving birth to an organ, like a literal organ. So that was wild. But after that, I sat with Odin. I got in bed. Again, just a normal bed with Brian, and Odin immediately went to the breast after that. He was a champ when it came to breastfeeding. I'm so lucky. His latch is great. So we breastfed for a while. He peed all over me right away, which I didn't even care. So I sat with him for a while. We breastfed, and then I got up and I took a shower right after. That felt super nice. The only requirement for me after giving birth was that I did have to pee. They had to make sure that I could do that, which I did. And we stayed there for about 4 hours after after delivery, and they just monitored. They obviously weighed Odin, measured him, did all of the testing for like the newborn testing that they needed to do. But all that skin to skin and breastfeeding happened before all of that. They made sure that he got all of his time with mom before they took him. And again, when I say take him, he was still right there in the room with me. They didn't take him away from me at any point. So yeah, that was it. And I don't want to undermine the pain, because I know that that's the scary part of natural childbirth. It was for me. I was terrified, which is normal, right? You'd be crazy if you weren't. It is extremely painful, like extremely painful. However, I had a 7-hour delivery. Labor and delivery was 7 hours. My water broke at 11:30 and I had Odin at 6 in the morning. That is, I don't know if I want to use the word impressive. That's exciting. That's great for a first-time mom. Normally, your body, we're told that it takes your body, a while to figure out what to do. I am fully of the belief that my labor was as quick as it was because I did not have any drugs. I didn't have the stress of nurses changing shifts. I didn't have the stress of like being in a space where people also go to die, right? Like it's also what the hospital is for. I was comfortable. I was around people that I was comfortable with. They were with me from beginning to end. There was no time constraint. Because believe it or not, at the hospital, you do have a time constraint. If you don't have your baby within a certain amount of time, you will go C-section. I didn't have to worry about them using forceps. I didn't have to worry about them giving me an episiotomy, because those were all things that I personally did not want. I was able to labor in whatever position I wanted. Because Odin was sunny side up, there was a time where the midwives asked me to change positions. They did not make me, but they said, hey, we should try a couple of things. And of course, I was ready to get him out of there. So I pushed for a little bit for one round of pushes. So I was getting 3 to 4 pushes in with each contraction. So I spent 2 contractions on my back, and it was horrendous. Again, horrible. So we moved again. I did 1 contraction standing bent over the bed, like with my arms on the bed. And I spent another round of contractions in a lunge position. And then we went back to the birthing stool again. So just trying to kind of dislodge him from where he was stuck. But again, all of this was very like on my terms. I chose the birthing stool. I chose the weird shower position because they just felt right, and I was able to follow those instincts. So I am already ready to have another baby. Maybe not right now, but I told Brian that we can try again later this year. I will definitely be going natural again. I think it is what is best for me and for my babies. Despite the pain, the second time is supposed to be faster. So we'll see. Maybe we have a 5-hour delivery instead of a 7-hour delivery. I don't want to jinx it. But I just wanted someone to hear, like, directly from the mouth of someone who's just had a baby, what natural childbirth is like. Again, to each their own. There are some women where a C-section is the only option. But I think that regardless of your pain tolerance, regardless of your fear, you can have a baby naturally if that's what you choose. Unless, of course, there are outliers. I hate the world that we live in and how we have to make sure that we're not stepping on so many toes. I understand that there are women with medical conditions. There are exceptions to this rule, right? Your baby being breech, his or her heart rate dropping and having to go to the hospital, like pre-existing condition. Like, I get it. The vast majority of women, I think, are more than capable of giving birth to their babies naturally. yeah, so that's kind of my birth story. It was overall a positive experience. It was a painful experience. It was a painful experience. I don't want to underemphasize that. Um, but it was a 7-hour labor and delivery, and while every labor and delivery is different, I think what set mine apart was not the 7 hours, it was the environment and the people, and the fact that I was very aware, conscious of what was going on and what was happening. I was always informed the entire time. People were asking permission to do things to my body if they needed to check me or if they needed to do this. They were very respectful of my autonomy. And I really think that made all the difference. So anyways, if you have questions about natural childbirth, I will answer what I can. I'm not an expert. I've had one baby, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I think that while there may be 2 people that watch this video, 2 people that care, or, really internalize any of what I'm saying, I think the start to building back that village that we've lost as a culture and as a community, part of it is being more open and sharing birth stories and talking to one another about what labor and delivery looks like. And my midwife, as well as a couple of other people that I've met along the way, Trisha Grunwald, Lindsay Buckles, women who have done it, right, and can answer all of your questions. That's the village that I've dipped my toes into, and those people between my midwives and the 2 women I just mentioned have absolutely kept me afloat. And I think that, the only way to get that village back is to do things like this. So if you have a birth story that you want to share, either in the comments or make your own video, I don't know. I think you should share your birth story. I think that your birth story is worth telling, even if it wasn't dramatic or horrific in some way. Those stories are also valid, and you should also tell them. But I think what happens is that a lot of times new moms, that's all that they're hearing are those kind of negative experiences. So share your birth story, check in on new moms, check in on pregnant women. I think that our saving grace in terms of having babies is surrounding yourself with people who have done it and can talk openly with you about what you're experiencing and what you're going through. So that's my 2 cents. Again, maybe this helps no one, and that's fine. It felt good for me to just talk about it, so that's also okay. But yeah, shoot me a message, tell me your birth story. I'd love to hear it. It's very interesting to me how other women experience birth. So shoot me a message, ask questions, just whatever. And hopefully eventually we can build back some sort of community of mothers again.